Hello, folks. Good morning. A little bit late. Sorry about that. Uh, it has been a morning. We have the incredibly humiliating inspection today for our rental properties, which I hate. I'm a grown man. I know how to look after my goddamn house, but some child is going to come around and make sure that I keep things clean enough for them for quote unquote insurance purposes. Right, the screen is black for some reason. Let me just check, see how that's working. There we go. Sorry, a bit of chaos, but we got there in the end, didn't we? Okay, no worries. So, today we have quite an interesting little job. We have returned to our work um, project in Adobe from the last edit of chapter 5 and 6, where
Oh.
everything was so distorted. It's absolutely horrible. I mean, have a look at those waveforms. It's just a solid line with occasional dips down there, you know? It's absolutely no good. So we're going to get rid of that. Boom! Delete! Delete the whole thing! All gone, all gone, all gone. And here's the new recording and editing. Look at that waveform. See, isn't that nicer? Isn't that nicer? There's still a little bit of clipping there, but that's okay. For the most part, it's much more varied and doesn't often hit those top lines, so that is good. So the first thing, of course, that we will do is normalize all peaks to -1 decibel, and that should keep it all nice and happy sounding. Now we will line up the end of the chapter announcement. It'll be a lot of just lining up today. We're just going to be making sure that all the sound effects that we set up for the last edit are still effective on the new edit. And of course, the timing will be a bit different, so we're going to be fiddling around with that sort of thing a little bit. Here we go. Let's see how it sounds.
Chapter 5. The Burglary at the Vicarage.
A little bit back.
Chapter 5. The Burglary at the Vicarage.
Actually, let's just do a little bit of auto matching.
Chapter 5. The Burglary at the Vicarage. The facts.
And then, sorry, normalize all peaks to -1 after that. Doom. There we go. That should be good. That makes it all standard, sets it at the same volume as all the other chapters and whatnot. A trick I wish I'd known when I had first started doing all of this. My early audiobooks would have been much better if I'd known more about what I was doing. But that's what learning is, isn't it?
Chapter 5. The Burglary at the Vicarage. The facts of the burglary at the vicarage came to us chiefly through the medium of the vicar and his wife. It occurred in the small hours of Whit Monday, the day devoted in Epping to the club festivities. Mrs. Bunding, it seems, woke up suddenly in the stillness that comes before the dawn, with the strong impression that the door of their bedroom had opened and closed.
That's good.
She did not arouse her husband at
Timing
first, but
not so
sat
bad
up
so
in
far.
bed, listening. She then distinctly heard the pad, pad, pad of bare feet coming out of the adjoining dressing room and walking along the passage towards the staircase. As soon as she felt assured of this, she aroused the Reverend Mr. Bunting as quickly as possible. He did not strike a light, but putting...
Right, we're falling behind a bit. That's okay.
Quickly as possible. He did not strike a light, but putting on his spectacles, her dressing gown, and his bath slippers, he went out on light, but putting on his spectacles, her dressing gown, and his bath slippers, he went out on the landing to listen. He heard, quite distinctly, a fumbling going on at his study desk downstairs, and then a violent sneeze.
Right, that's quite a long way out.
A fumbling going on at his study desk downstairs, and then a violent sneeze. At that, he returned to his bedroom. And then a violent sneeze. At that, he returned to his bedroom, armed himself with the most obvious weapon, the poker.
Yeah, there's going to be quite a lot of realigning, isn't there? I was hoping it would be a bit closer than this, but no.
He returned to his bedroom, armed himself with the most obvious weapon, the poker, and descended the staircase as noiselessly.
So that's a bit loud.
As violent sneeze. At that, he returned to his bedroom, armed himself with the most obvious weapon, the poker, and
let's speed up those footsteps a little bit, shall we? Lots of little fiddling around sections, I'm afraid. That's going to be most of today. Although, if you're watching these editing streams, you know this is what this job is. It's lots of fiddling around, so I'm sure you're used to that by now.
That he returned to his bedroom, armed himself with the most obvious weapon, the poker, and descended the staircase as noiselessly as possible. Mrs. Bunting came out on the landing. The hour was about 4, and the ultimate darkness of the night was past. There was a faint shimmer of light in the hall, but the study doorway yawned impenetrably black. Everything was still, except the faint creaking of the stairs under Mr. Bunting's tread and the slight movements in the study. Then something snapped. Mr. Bunting's tread and the slight movements in the study. Then something snapped. The drawer was opened, and there was a rustle of papers. Then came an...
Right. Okay, that's all quite a lot further back.
The drawer was opened, and there was a rustle of papers. Then came in...
Back even more.
Something snapped. The drawer was opened, and there was a rustle of papers. Then came an imprecaution, and a match was struck. Then came an imprecaution. Then came an imprecaution, and a match was struck, and the study was flooded with yellow light. Mr. Bunting was now in the hall, and through the crack of the door he...
Where's that match? There it is. Way down there. All right.
And a match was struck.
Match has to come back. There we go.
Match was struck, and the study was flooded with...
That's too loud.
Struck, and the study was flooded with yellow light. Mr. Bunting was now in the hall, and through the crack of the door he could see the desk and the open drawer and a candle burning on the desk. But the robber he could not see. He stood there in the hall, undecided what to do, and Mrs. Bunting, her face white and intent, crept slowly downstairs after him. One thing kept Mr. And Mrs. Bunting, her face white and intent, crept slowly downstairs after him. One thing kept Mr. Bunting's courage, the persuasion that this burglar was a resident in the village. They heard the chink of money and realized that the robber had found the housekeeping reserve of gold, £2.10 in half sovereigns altogether. At that sound, Mr. Bunting was nerved to abrupt action. Gripping the poker fiercely, he rushed into the room, closely followed by Mrs. Bunting. "Surrender!" cried Mr. Bunting fiercely, and then stooped, amazed. Apparently, the room was perfectly empty. Yet their conviction that they had that very moment heard some...
Right. Okay. Now. All right, this is where things start getting a bit creepy. Which is why I have done this.
Mr. Bunting fiercely, and then stooped, amazed. Apparently, the room was perfectly empty. Yet...
break that up a little.
Fiercely, and then stooped, amazed. Apparently, the room was perfectly empty. Yet their conviction that they had that very moment heard somebody moving in the room had amounted to a certainty. For half a minute, perhaps, they stood gaping. Apparently, the room was perfectly empty. Bunting fiercely, and then stooped, amazed. Apparently, the room was perfectly empty.
Alright, I don't want that to start swelling until after that word, but I don't want it to take too long to come up to full.
Stooped, amazed. Apparently, the room was perfectly empty. Yet their conviction that they had that very moment heard somebody moving in the room had amounted to a certainty. For half a minute, perhaps, they stood gaping. Then Mrs. Bunting went across the room and looked behind the screen, while Mrs. Bunting went across the...
One moment. I hope that worked. I really need one of those little like a control panel with some extra buttons that I can just, like mute my microphone and stuff without a 3 keyboard command that usually triggers something else in the program I'm using.
The room and looked behind the screen, while Mr. Bunting, by a kindred impulse, peered under the desk. Then Mrs. Bunting turned back the window curtains, and Mr. Bunting looked up the chimney and probed it with a poker. Then Mrs. Bunting scrutinized the...
Right, that's still way back. Definitely my second delivery of this chapter was a lot faster than the first time I recorded it.
And Mr. Bunting looked up the chimney and probed it with a poker. Then Mrs. Bunting scrutinized the waste...
Let's say -10. They're all a bit loud, aren't they?
Up the chimney and probed it with a poker. Then
I just made it louder. -20. How about that? Ha!
Probed it with a poker. Then Mrs. Bunting scrutinized the waste paper basket, and Mr. Bunting opened the lid of the coal scuttle. Then they came to a stop and stood with eyes in coal scuttle. Then they came to a stop and stood with eyes interrogating each other. I could have sworn, said Mr. Bunting. The candle! Who lit the candle? The drawer, said Mrs. Bunting. And the money's gone. She went hastily to the doorway.
That wasn't very hasty, was it? 125. Will do, but we'll move that forward a couple of notches.
And the money's gone. She went hastily to the doorway. Of all the strange occurrences. There was a violent sneeze in the passage. They rushed out. In the passage. They rushed out, and as they did so, the kitchen door slammed. Bring the candle, said Mr. Bunting, and led the way. They both heard a sound of bolts being hastily shot back. As he opened the kitchen door, he saw through the scullery that the back door was just opening, and the faint light of early being hastily shot back. As he opened the kitchen door, he saw through the scullery that the back door was just opening, and the faint light of early dawn displayed the dark masses of the garden beyond. He is certain that nothing went out of the door. It opened, stood open for a moment, and then closed with a slam. As it did so, the candle Mrs. Bunting was carrying from the study flickered and flared.
What the heck is that doing that loud? Wait.
The garden beyond. He is certain that nothing went out of the door. It opened, stood open for a moment, and then closed with a slam. As it did so, the candle Mrs. Bunting was carrying from the study flickered and flared. It was a minute or more before they entered the kitchen. The place was empty. They refastened the back door, examined the kitchen, pantry, and scullery thoroughly, and at last went down into the cellar. Was empty. They refastened the back door.
By the way, if you're looking for a tongue twister, a small one, there's one coming up in just a moment.
Examined the kitchen, pantry. Empty. They refastened the back door, examined the kitchen.
It's like a tenth of a second too late, and that's too far.
They refastened the back door, examined the
There we
kitchen,
go.
pantry, and scullery thoroughly, and at last went
There it is.
pantry and scullery thoroughly.
Scullery thoroughly. Try that one 5 times fast. Yeesh.
The kitchen, pantry, and scullery thoroughly, and at last went down into the cellar. There was not a soul to be found in the house, search as they would. Daylight found
Oh,
down into the cellar. There was not a soul to be found in the house, search as they would. Daylight found the vicar and his wife, a quaintly costumed little couple, still marvelling about on their own ground floor by the unnecessary light of a guttering candle. Chapter 6. The
right. That happens
own
much
ground
earlier.
floor by the unnecessary light of a guttering candle.
Oh. And Delito and Delito, right?
By the unnecessary light of a guttering candle. Chapter 6. The furniture that went mad. Now, it happened that in the early hours...
Whoa, way too loud. Way too loud. Alright. Of course, all of these sound effects would have been set to a volume where I was trying to deal with the clipping and distortion of the horrible previous recording of these 2 chapters. So that's why they're so loud. So I'm going to have to adjust most of them.
Furniture that went mad. Now, it happened that in the early hours of Whit Monday, before Millie had been hunted out for the day, Mr. Hall and Mrs. Hall both rose and went noiselessly. The furniture that went mad. Now, it happened that in the early hours of Witcher that went mad. Now, it happened that in the early hours of Whit Monday, before Millie had been hunted out for the day, Mr. Hall and Mrs. Hall both rose and went noiselessly down into the cellar. Their business and went noiselessly down into the cellar. Their business there was of a private nature. Noiselessly down into the cellar. Their business there was of a private nature, and had something to do with the specific gravity of their beer. They had hardly entered the cellar when Mrs. Hall found she had forgotten to bring down a bottle of sarsaparilla from their joint room. As she was the expert and principal operator in this affair, Hall, very properly, went upstairs for it. On the landing, he was surprised to see that the stranger's door was ajar. He went on into his own room and found the bottle as he had been directed, but returning with the bottle, very properly went upstairs for it. On the landing, he was surprised to see that the stranger's door was ajar. He went on into his own room and found the bottle as he had been directed, but returning with the bottle, he noticed that the bolts of the front door had been shot back, that the door was, in fact, simply on the latch, and with a flash of inspiration he connected this with the stranger's room upstairs and the suggestions of Mr. Teddy Henfrey. He distinctly remembered holding the candle while Mrs. Hall shot these bolts overnight. At the sight, he stopped, gaping, then, with the bottle still in his hand, went upstairs again. He rapped at the stranger's door. There was no answer. He stopped, gaping, then, with the bottle still in his hand, went upstairs again. He rapped at the stranger's door. There was no answer. He rapped again, then pushed the door wide open and entered. He rapped again, then pushed the door wide open and entered. Rapped again, then pushed the door wide open and entered. It was as he expected. The bed, the room also, was empty. And what was stranger, even to his heavy intelligence, on the bedroom chair and along the rail of the bed were scattered the garments, the only garments, so far as he knew, and bandages of their guest. His big slouch hat, even, was cocked jauntily over the bedpost. As Hall stood there, he heard his wife's voice coming out of the depths of the cellar, with that rapid telescoping of the syllables and interrogative cocking up of the final words to a high note, by which the West Sussex villager is wont to indicate a brisk impatience. "George, you got what I want?" At that, he turned and hurried down to her. "John!"
Turned and hurried down to her, and then no sound effect. What, was I asleep at this point? What's going on?
He turned and hurried down to her. "Johnny!" At that, he turned and hurried down to her. "Johnny!" "George, you got what I want?" At that, he turned and hurried down to her. "Johnny!" he said over the rail of the cellar steps. "'T's the truth what Henry says. He's not in his room, he ain't, and the front door's unbolted." At first, Mrs. Hall did not understand, and as soon as she did, she resolved to see the empty room for herself. Hall, still holding the bottle, went first. "If he ain't there," he said, "his clothes are, and what's he doing without his clothes, then? 'Tis a most curious business." As they came up the cellar steps, they both, it was afterwards ascertained, Hall, still holding the bottle. "His clothes are, and what's he doing without his clothes, then? 'Tis a most curious business." As they came up the cellar steps, they both, it was afterwards ascertained, fancied they heard the front door open and shut, but seeing it closed and nothing there, neither said a word to the other. The front door open. Door open and shut, but seeing it closed and nothing, fancied they heard the front door open and shut, but seeing it closed and nothing there, neither said a word to the other about it at the time. Mrs. Hall passed her husband in the passage and ran on first upstairs. Other about it at the time. Mrs. Hall passed her husband in the passage and ran on first up. Hall passed her husband in the passage and ran on first upstairs. Someone sneezed.
Doors and footsteps, footsteps and doors. It's most of my job.
Sneezed on the staircase. Hall, following 6 steps behind, thought that he sneezed on the staircase. Hall...
On sneezed or in the gap?
Someone sneezed on the staircase.
It's probably okay if it's back a bit.
Someone sneezed on the staircase.
Yeah.
Hall, following 6 steps behind, thought that he... heard her sneeze. She, going on first, was under the impression that Hall was sneezing. She flung open the door and stood regarding the room. She flung open the door and stood regarding the room. "Of all the curious," she said. She heard a sniff close behind her.
What a terrible sound effect.
Close behind her head, as it seemed, and turning, was surprised to see Hall a dozen feet off on the topmost stair. But in another moment he was beside her. She bent forward and put her hand on the pillow and then under the clothes. "Cold," she said. "He's been up this hour or more." As she did so, a most extraordinary thing happened. The bedclothes gathered themselves together, leapt up suddenly into a sort of peak, and then jumped headlong over the bottom rail. It leapt up suddenly into a sort of peak, and then jumped headlong over the bottom rail. It was exactly as if a hand had clutched them in the centre and flung them aside. Immediately after, the stranger's hat hopped off the bedpost, described a whirling flight in the air through the better part of a circle, and then dashed straight at Mrs. Hall's face. Then, as swiftly, came the sponge from the washstand, and then the chair, flinging the sponge from the washstand, and then the chair, flinging the stranger's coat and trousers carelessly aside, and laughing the stranger's coat and trousers carelessly aside, and laughing dryly in a voice singularly like the stranger's, turned itself up with its four legs at Mrs. Hall, seemed to take aim at her for a moment, and charged at her. She screamed and turned, and then the chair legs came gently but firmly against her back, and impelled her and Hall out of the room. The door slammed violently and was locked. The chair and
Wow, those sound effects just all lined up perfectly, didn't they? Look at that.
bed seemed
So
to be
good.
executing a dance of triumph for a moment, and then, abruptly, everything was still. Mrs. Hall was left almost in a fainting condition in Mr. Hall's arms on the landing. It was with the greatest difficulty that Mr. Hall and Milly, who had been roused by her scream of alarm, succeeded in getting her downstairs and applying the restoratives customary in such cases. "'Tis spirits," said Mrs. Hall. "I know 'tis spirits. I read it in papers of 'en. Tables and chairs leaping and dancing." "Take a drop more, Johnny," said Hall. "'Twill steady you." "Lock him out," said Mrs. Hall. "Don't let him come in again. I half guessed. I might have known, with them goggling eyes." Customary in such cases. "'Tis spirits," said Mrs. Hall. "I know 'tis spirits. I read it in papers of 'en. Tables and chairs leaping and dancing." "Take a drop more, Johnny," said Hall. "'Twill steady you." "Lock him out," said Mrs. Hall. "Don't let him come in again. I half guessed. I might have known, with them goggling eyes and bandaged head and never going to church of a Sunday, and all they bottles, more'n it's right for anyone to have. He's put the spirits into the furniture. My good furniture! 'Twas in that very chair my poor dear mother used to sit when I was a little girl. To think it should rise up against me now!"
I'm not surprised that there's a bit of clipping during that speech. That's basically where I expected it, where Mrs. Hall is, getting a bit hyperbolic.
"Just a drop more, Johnny," said Hall. "Your nerves is all upset." They sent Milly across the street through the golden 5 o'clock sunshine to rouse up Mr. Sandy Wadges, the blacksmith. They sent Milly across...
Now that, I don't know why I didn't change the scene there. It's almost like I didn't hit save during the last, like the actual conclusion of the editing, because there's a few that have not been kept, a few little changes that are not there. Now, for this one, we want early village, but not the bell. So maybe we'll just go the countryside English summer, I think. That's a good sound effect for this one. And we don't know how long this is going to go. Not very long, I think. Milly just sort of trots across the road and gets the local blacksmith with the most unfortunate name in literary history, and then comes back. So it's not a big change. It's not going to last too long,
said Hall. "Your nerves is all upset." They sent Milly across the street through the golden 5 o'clock sunshine to rouse up Mr. Sandy Wadges, the blacksmith.
Sandy Wadges. Yeesh.
Mr. Hall's compliments, and the furniture upstairs was behaving most extraordinary. Would Mr. Wadges come round? He was a knowing man, was Mr. Wadges, and very resourceful. He took quite a grave view of the case. "I'm darned if that ain't witchcraft," was the view of Mr. Sandy Wadges. "You want horseshoes for such gentry as he?" He came
nice, but we'll kill your volume then.
The Sandy Wadgers.
Look how loud
You
that
want
bird is.
horseshoes for such
That's
gentry
a
as
loud bird.
He came round greatly concerned.
You know what? I'm going to cancel that bird. You've been too mouthy on social media, bird. Get out of here. Get out of here. We don't want your kind round here. All right. There we go.
Badgers. You want horseshoes for such gentry as he? He came round greatly concerned.
Right, here we go. Hey, Mud Injector, welcome. We'll be back at Valheim in about an hour and a half or something like that. A little bit longer. Yeah. Gonna go kill that bug queen. It'll be a good day. Unless we fail over and over again, and then it'll be a bad day. Alright.
Tea.
Concentrate on the job at hand, Steve. Gaming comes later.
He came round greatly concerned. They wanted him to lead the way upstairs to the room, but he didn't seem to be in any hurry. He preferred to talk in the passage. Over the way, Huckster's apprentice came out and began taking down the shutters of the tobacco window. He was called over to join the discussion. Mr. Huckster naturally followed over in the course of a few minutes. The Anglo-Saxon genius for parliamentary government asserted itself. There was a great deal of talk and no decisive action. Let's have the facts first.
Oh, that was me trying to put the chat window up, but it has decided not to work. 1 second, I'll see if I can fix that. Back in a minute. It is indeed Night City, well spotted. Okay, let's see if that works. Is that going to happen? Oh, yes, good. There we go. You're back up there. Yeah, Cyberpunk stream. Well, we tried that yesterday, and my laptop was just being a little bit poopy, and it decided to crash and just die horribly, crash and burn and die, and screaming in a pit and pile of agony, covered in petrol and lighting itself on fire. So I ended up doing some more boxing, and then last night we did a little trial stream to see if I could figure out what was going wrong, and I think I did, so we could do that at some point. I love Cyberpunk. It's one of my favorite all-time games. So, yeah, I'm definitely up for that.
Insisted Mr. Sandy Wadgers. Let's be sure we be acting perfectly right in busting that there door open. A door unbust is always open to busting, but...
1 second, we'll just... there we go. Right. I thought we were missing the most recent chats down the bottom there, and we are. All right. Concentrate, Steve. Come on. We don't have much left on this stream. We're nearly at the end of this chapter.
Let's be sure we be acting perfectly right in busting that there door open. A door unbust is always open to busting, but you can't unbust a door once you bust it in.
Important life's lesson for everybody.
A door unbust is always open to busting, but you can't unbust a door once you bust it in.
Right? That's high philosophy there.
And suddenly, and most wonderfully, the door of the room upstairs opened.
And that's a little bit too early and way too loud.
The door of the room upstairs opened of its own accord. And as they looked up in amazement, they saw, descending the stairs, the muffled figure of the stranger, staring more blackly and blankly than ever, with those unreasonably large blue glass eyes of his. He came down stiffly and slowly, staring all the time. He walked across the passage staring. Down stiffly and slowly, staring all the time. He walked across the passage staring, then stopped.
Right, that's that one. Okay.
He came down stiffly and slowly, staring all the time. He walked across the passage staring, then stopped. "Look there," he said, and their eyes followed the direction of his gloved finger and saw a bottle of sarsaparilla hard by the cellar door. Then he entered the parlor and suddenly, swiftly, viciously slammed the door in their faces. In their faces. Not a word was spoken until the last echoes of slammed the door in their faces. Not a word was spoken until the last echoes of the slam had died away. They stared at one another. "Well, if that don't lick everything," said Mr. Wadgers, and left the alternative unsaid.
What is the alternative? Well, if that don't lick everything and left the alternative unsaid, if it does lick everything? Disgusting. Half the time I don't know what the hell Wells is talking about. His references are so out of time with what we're used to now. It's it's odd. It's difficult.
"I'd go in and ask him about it," said Wadgers to Mr. Hall. "I'd demand an explanation." It took some time to bring the landlady's husband up
wrong.
to that pitch, but at last he rapped, opened the door, opened the door and got as far as, "Excuse me." "Go to the devil," said the stranger in a tremendous voice, and "shut that door after you." So that brief interview terminated.
Okay, let's line that up properly. Dunk. Fantastic. Look at that.
Said Mr. Wadgers, and left the alternative unsaid. "I'd go in and ask him about it," said Wadgers to Mr. Hall. "I'd demand an explanation." It took some time to bring the landlady's husband up to that pitch, but at last he rapped, opened the door, and got as far as, "Excuse me." "Go to the devil," said the stranger in a tremendous voice, and "shut that door after you." So that brief interview terminated. Brief interview terminated.
Let's just bring
Door after you. So that door after you. So that brief interview terminated.
Excellent. All right, that blended quite well. Whew. All right. I mean, that could have been much, much, much worse. It really could have. So that's oh wait, I forget what we've called these things. It's been a while. No, not working. The actual finished. There we go. Uh, 5-06. There we go. Boom! Fantastic. Ah, happy, happy, happy. Worth it, worth it, worth it. In the old days, I probably would have just gone, I screwed up the recording a bit, but we'll leave it. It'll be fine. It's good enough. Bleh, who cares? Now, it's like, no, no, no. What? 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 Don't be a twit. Bloody Premiere Pro, I'm telling you. For the amount they charge, it is not good enough, honestly, this program. $30 a month you have to pay to use Adobe Premiere Pro. Anyway, as I was saying before, in the old days, I probably would have just left it. You know, there's a lot of old errors in my earliest audiobooks that are still there, and I can't listen to them anymore because of those errors. They just make me want to vomit on my own microphone. But nowadays, like it makes me far more willing to go back and fix things. And in this case, we recorded chapter 5 and 6. We edited the master of 5 and 6 and thought, that sounds a little bit wobbly, but maybe it'll be okay once we do the sound effects edit. And then we did the sound effects edit, and it was still all horrible. So we went back and re-recorded everything, started again from the beginning, and now we've got something that we can be proud of. Isn't that good? Okay, so we save that. Now we go to save a copy as the no SFX for no sound effects. Right. Then we get rid of those thumbnails. That's first. I have forgotten that in the past as well. Working. This is when working, which is there. No, it's not. Where have we put it? There we go, all the thumbnails. We even made a new thumbnail for it, which is quite silly. I didn't have to do that. Okay, there's 5 and 6. You go back there. Now that looks like the break, is it?
Chapter 6.
Yes, it is. Very good. Well done, Stephen. Well spotted. Video transitions. Fade to black. Did that work? Yep. There we go. No, it's not going to be quite that. We don't quite make them meet up. There we go.
Chapter on their own ground floor by the unnecessary light of a guttering candle. Chapter 6. The furniture.
There we go. All good. And now, all of that hard sound effects work. We grab it all and delete it. All gone. Bye-bye. No sound effects, please. That's all sound effects too, isn't it? Yep. Bye. See you later. And just recently, I've started even getting rid of the music.
Chapter 5. The burglary at the vicarage. The facts of...
I mean, that's why you have to spend so much time making sure the mastering edit is as good as it can possibly be. Because when you don't have the sound effects there, every little error that you make shows up. There we go. Fantastic. Fantastisch. And the video. And as usual, my wife is the big test. She's the final test of these things. I get her to listen to stuff, and if she notices an error, then I know it's big enough that the audience will notice it too. Because I hear everything, I notice everything, and I know it's there, so I know what to listen for. But I have in the past spent ages trying to fix some little error, only to find that no one heard it except me. So now, I make my wife listen. There we go. All right. That's all of that. Yes. Yes. There we go. The Invisible Man, 5 and 6, graphic audiobook, jolly good. No sound effects, can both bog off. Wait, alright, hold on. Do the videos first. There we go. All sorted, no effects, good. And then you just go in there, don't you? Yep, brilliant. All handled, all done. There we go, 5 and 6, all complete. What the heck are you? I have no idea. All right. So there we go. Oh, this is this channel. I don't know what I'm looking at. All right, there we go. So I think that should be the right page now. No, it's not because there's no pictures. How about we go back to Night City? Ah, there we go. Lovely. Fantastic. So I'm sorry, I'm on the other computer and I've been trying to make sure they're both the same, but it's remarkably difficult just to get them to agree on what things look like. So that's it for this stream. I know it's quite a short one, but we had a short job to do today. Tomorrow, yes, tomorrow morning, we will be recording chapter 7 of The Invisible Man. Let's just have a quick look at how long that is. There we go. Back to this scene, so you can have a look with me. This is the version we're going with. I always go to Gutenberg.org. I originally used Gutenberg.org.au, which is the Australian version of Gutenberg, but then I got in an enormous amount of trouble with American lawyers because the copyright laws in Australia are not the same as the copyright laws in America, which shouldn't matter, but it does as far as YouTube is concerned. So now I only use books that you can find in the public domain in America. So, Chapter 7, The Unveiling of the Stranger. Looks like a decent length. Yeah, not too bad. Not like Chapter 8. Look at that. That's another tiny one. See, this is the problem I had with Chapter 5 and 6. I had to combine them because 5 was so small. Look at Chapter 8. That's the whole of Chapter 8. Tiny. So we'll record Chapter 7. And we'll see how long that is. It looks like a decent length, though. So maybe we'll combine 8 with 9. We'll have a look. Yeah, 9 looks a little bit shorter than 7. So we'll do Chapter 7. We'll record that tomorrow. And then edit it. Do the master edit on Monday, sound effects edit Tuesday. And then next Wednesday, we'll record Chapter 8 and Chapter 9. See, this is how we work. I know these live streams are not very interesting. Don't feel the need to come along and watch them unless you're actually interested in how these things go. Because honestly, I'm live streaming these every day to keep me honest, to make sure, I do some work on the audiobooks every morning before I go off and do other things. So that's what this is all about. Back to the flash screen. There we go. Hopefully that worked. Yes, wonderful. Don't have any music playing though. I wonder